Alright, you know what? I think this is how I'm going to film from now on. Just get a nice stool and use this nice rocking chair. I'm getting sick of sitting on the floor, you know? But like I said before, Chris Christopherson is in this movie. He plays Blade's mentor, Whistler. Whistler is, like I said, Blade's mentor, but he's also his friend and his supplier. He supplies Blade with all the weapons he needs to hunt down the vampires. This movie came out at the height of Buffy the Vampire craze, okay? If you are a fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, this is your film. In fact, I'm surprised that they didn't make a movie about Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I mean, they did back in the early 90s with Donald Sutherland in it, but they should have made a big movie like Buffy the Vampire Slayer the movie, a major motion picture with Sarah Michelle Gellar and company in the Blade films. Blade versus Buffy. Yet they didn't. So, complete shame. But I enjoy Blade. I really loved Blade. And yes, Blade wears sunglasses, that's why I've got mine on. This was a really good superhero introduction movie. Lots of those superhero films that introduce us to the new character, like to the main character, films like Iron Man, Sam Raimi's first Spider-Man film, they're all good introduction movies. Every good superhero introduction film needs a solid plot. Who is our character? What is this character's power? And who is the villain they're gonna fight, right? And in this movie, we have a plot and we have a villain. Deacon Frost. The problem I have with Deacon Frost is he's a bit of a man-child at times. It's not until the end when he started to get better. In the beginning, when we first meet him, he's just comes off as this man-child. But towards the end, I was thinking, yeah, now he's acting like the kind of villain that I was expecting him to be. This movie has such a climax. It's like a build. Think of it like a volcano. Builds and builds and builds, and then the final fight happens. Okay, I'm not going to really spoil the final fight for you guys per se, but what I am going to say is that Wesley Snipes, his fighting in this movie, he is exactly like Bruce Lee. He reminded me of Bruce Lee. And I just thought, if Bruce Lee lived long enough to see Blade, or, you know, to get offered Blade, he would be perfect for Blade. I think Bruce Lee would be good in any superhero film. I mean, who wants to see Bruce Lee being a superhero in the films, right? So, why do I like Blade? Well, I like Marvel. I'm a Marvel fan. I do love all the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, but the Marvel films were aimed at kids, teens, and adults. Blade is full-blown teens and adults. So don't have your 7-year-old son or daughter watch Blade, okay? There are some computer-generated effects that are completely dated from that are a far cry from what the effects are we have today, as opposed to what we had in the late 90s, early 2000s. So, but still traumatizing for a little kid to have a look at. So this one's for the adults or the teenagers. I really think Blade was a good introduction superhero film, and I thought there was no problem at all with the script. I thought the acting was great. Wesley Snipes, I haven't really watched much of his other films. I know he was a big star in the 90s and early 2000s, and then he fell from grace, but I don't really know much about Wesley Snipes, to be honest with you. A lot of these actors in the movie we hardly hear about nowadays. We don't hear about Stephen Dorff, Chris Christopherson, or Wesley Snipes. I guess they have a rise and then a fall. That's show business for you. I really think Blade should be remembered as an introduction to the Marvel superhero film genre. And this was one of the first like real Marvel movies to come out. And, you know, just a couple years later, the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie came out, and that was a milestone. And then from that point on, the superhero films kept on coming. But it wasn't until 2008 when we really started to get serious about superhero films, with films like Iron Man and The Incredible Hulk. And thus, the Marvel Cinematic Universe was born. Well, I wonder, would Blade be good in the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Hard to say, really. I think that Blade also started the trench coat genre. In the late 90s and early 2000s, it was cool to wear those long black trench coats, whether if it was made of wool or leather. You just had to be cool to wear a long coat and have sunglasses on. Because a year later, The Matrix came out. The first Matrix film came out. And from that point on, after The Matrix came out, all those long coats that we see nowadays became die-hard popular.